Even if we don't do anything else the rest of the year, up there, so I'm happy.
Coming over the lake next weekend.
I think so. But the problem is,
I was asking Roger. Privilege. For an NBC, not everybody else is.
I know.
Yeah, I know I do. I know I have. Last year,
When does Sandro join?
I want to say tomorrow, maybe.
Is he on his honeymoon?
Tomorrow, the next day.
Well, technically he's 30, I think.
They're good. They turned 1 last week.
Yeah, they went, yeah.
So, and they're loud and walking and running. And 2 boys, yeah. So Ryan now says no. So he's like, do you want some milk? No. No. I'm like, baby, you're supposed to be sweet. It's great to see you.
Good to see
How you put a baby to sleep.
Oh, did you sing? No.
Oh wait.
You put a blanket over them over and over? No. Oh, okay. I've tried that. My kids are really freak out.
So this, I don't know, just tiny infants. Like they were usually probably just
Lots to repeat in the question.
so you kind of fold the baby's arms, making sure that everything's in place, and then you like lean them forward at a 45-degree angle, and then you rock them like that.
Yeah, I've tried it.
No,
There's
that
this
not
thing
work?
called, his name is like a baby whisperer or something or other. He's like a pediatrician, and he has all these things you do, it's like shh, and you like rock up, and then like you hold them at a certain angle, and then you swallow it, and like all these things. My kids like defy it. They defy everything. Like anything that's supposed to work for them, they're like.
I heard they're running.
Yeah. They
Oh, are they here?
Yeah. I think they're gonna probably late. They're probably like 6. So probably, yeah. Yeah.
Did they run into things?
Everything is no now. Like any question you ask, no. Or yeah. Would you like a cookie? Yeah. Yeah. Can be kind of yeah. Zipper. They're loud, and they never like really walked. They just ran. It's like they went from crawling really fast to just running. So like, and especially Jake, he's just like
Runs into things?
oh my gosh, yeah, he's had a black eye already. And he's constantly he falls and they tackle each other. It's like, I mean, like if one of them is climbing on something, the other wants it, he just grabs his shirt and rips him down. Like, I mean, they're like wrestle. I know. I'm like,
A couple little puppies, huh?
yeah, they're like little monkeys. You know, they like even like how they like when they fall over their feet. Last night, so their cribs kind of like this. And I was trying to get them to sleep. They would get up and they'd face each other in their cribs and they'd see each other go. And throw themselves back as hard as they could against mattresses. So they were like, I was really kind of hitting their head. And then they'd look at me like, why do you let me hurt myself? You know, kind of thing. But they'd get outside and go.
Yeah, I find dramatic.
Not a lot of peace, huh?
No.
Infomercials on the channel.
You know, whatever. Like, oh yeah, that makes sense. They should be sleeping better by 1. I'm like, yeah, they should be. They don't. They choose not to. Eric's gonna be away. He's gonna be traveling, so work from heaven. he'll go to my parents' house, I think, the boys are going to my parents' house, and then he comes home a couple days later, and his boys are gonna come in a day or two maybe before he gets there. Because we're gonna have Christmas on like the 28th. Which is fine. The boys don't know the difference. I'm gonna wrap a bunch of empty boxes. You know? I mean, they don't need toys. Yeah.
Told me I was going to investigation.
Cups, they love. Empty water bottles are big.
I asked her like,
Empty
really
Tupperware
broad,
containers are
but
huge.
she was like, I'm just not comfortable.
Yeah, I'm just not gonna spend money on toys for them. They break them. They eat everything. Like, they eat books.
Thanks for returning my call.
Yeah, those books.
You might
They
as
like
well
she
not.
bites out of the cardboard and
Wait, how many teeth do they have?
little animals. Ryan has 6 and Jake has 8.
We were in Dan wrote a story.
We can do some serious fighting.
Yeah, they're like little daggers too.
And we ran it because we were watching this.
Yeah, they're biting now.
They bite each other? Or?
They bite me.
Oh.
I'm afraid, my concern is they're gonna start biting other kids. But I think they really are doing it. It's like they get really excited, I pick them up and they like bite my shoulder. And yeah, and I don't know what to do about it. Like,
Are you covering stuff?
No.
they think no is funny. And I think
I wish I could do some of that in practice. You know.
oh no.
So maybe that's why the nurse starts
So was she in daycare? Yeah.
much better. Her nurse is so
Oh, you too.
Oh man. That's so
You too? Were they actually playing in service last night?
We called her Jaws.
Should be interesting.
It's just, I'm afraid because at daycare, biting is grounds for being kicked out of daycare. So now, I'm like, great. Like, the other kids can give them hand, foot, and mouth. My kid can't bite your hand, you know, like, or they can like, pushing each other down. Yeah, biting, aggressive biting is grounds for being kicked out of daycare.
First offense?
Yeah, first offense is to get a call, and especially if there's, and then there's an incident report. Get an incident report.
Book them.
What's that?
Yours were not.
No, not yet, but I'm worried about it.
We need to protest the time issue. I mean, it's every
It's always
time.
Yeah.
15
And
minutes,
it's just, we gotta have it more precise. There's no excuse.
No.
No excuse.
What time is it?
It's now 10 minutes in.
If he's, I mean, should we give him one more minute? And then
That's something that you could get
I
involved
mean,
in.
it's pretty serious.
It's like
We all both
Waste everyone's time.
Well, they need to give us a 2-minute warning like we do at state, you know?
Yeah.
That would be fine.
You gotta announce it
Yeah.
to the booth a month.
Yeah, come down. You guys said he's gonna be there in 2 minutes.
Helps.
For 5 minutes,
Running
whatever. We don't have like an overhead announcement system in our area, do we?
No, I don't know why not.
I guess only the fire alarm is only overhead.
Seems like they could do that. If they could do it at the State Department, they could do it here.
Yeah,
Do they do that there?
yeah.
Yeah.
Because the
Yeah,
briefings are
voice.
so rarely on time. They give you a 2-minute warning.
Because you're just a couple steps away. So.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
Oh yeah. I was gonna take this time to actually.
Seems very much going on.
Donald Trump.
Yeah.
This is what I'm supposed to ask.
Oh.
Not my dad. How does anti-Muslim rhetoric make us less safe? No, that I cannot ask that. Not ask the second one. I was thinking of saying, like, is there any change or even is there any, like, are there any refresher training or sensitivity or concerns to home exposure treated differently? Or instances that you're not treated differently? It's just gonna come back and say, no, you're treated with respect. Yeah, no. Maybe the numbers are not Muslim soldiers are fighting on the side. Yeah. We also got women
Yeah. And there were some interesting figures. Yeah, that's actually are there US figures, Muslim US? Yeah, I'm sure. Well, actually, the percentage is so small. I mean, it's a small percentage. It's like a third of 1%. Yeah, it's 1/3 of 1% of active Muslims. Yeah. So it's also more than another in Morocco.
Okay, so do you need corner here? These ones?
Is there a Muslim who changes the trajectory of the living conditions of Afghanistan?
I don't know.
I don't remember that.
It's teaching schools, but I know that the base, yeah, Idaho used to be part of a very large.
Well, in some ways it's better because they don't have to
I was thinking that's just really crazy. Is the U.S. military tracking all the
A
Muslim
little bit.
soldiers?
I mean, you could sort of see it.
How much money do you spend?
Geographical features of like Boise, Boise always has slowly
Imagine
low
what it'd be
rate.
like if they had no instant like that one just before the Iraq war started in the camp. Fire something with it.
Yeah, yeah.
Pretty big deal. Now it's
Yeah.
really terrible.
Yeah, but it was that was an issue. It was an issue that
Not in Boise, but I did.
commander, right? I don't think it was like a religious thing.
No, I think it was.
I think it was he was like in a fight with over weed or something. I can't remember.
Mine's about 10, so we shoot.
Yeah.
Like in the middle of the
My
night.
same thing.
Look at this, how they started.
Yeah, it was right before.
I mean, it's incredible. When I learned that in like middle school.
I'm guessing they do
Sorry, mentioned to me.
Every single time.
Yeah.
Pretty much
I
every
think a
time.
letter.
And I had like nightmares.
It's a good way for them to keep us all correct. And then they
Because
say,
even watching it, I'm like, oh, it is like some content.
Kind of insulting.
one off there's no way
You'll just be like the two, the not famous 50 many years ago. That was the worst part of it. She's like over in California. Years ago, there was a totally friend who never acted.
we're supposed to get wireless. In
here?
Yeah.
Did we hear that?
Yes, they're working on it.
I'm in Washington. What's new in Washington State? It's very cold. Like, you say Montana is mountainside. Very small state.
Washington's pretty big. Washington's a big
Very
state. Yeah, I mean, it's smaller than California, but it's big to us.
Of course, McCain, the black.
Yep.
Washington DC.
Yeah.
Washington
That'll be
State
good
is
when
like
you're finally.
California.
Yeah,
It's on the
way
east.
east and
And
west.
then it's called Shrieking.
That's different concept. One Korean guy said, I'm in Dallas Airport. What do you mean that they thought Texas sounds? It sounds like that Dallas. Korean say Dallas.
Yeah, that's about South America too, I think.
And he's doing a camera. And he's doing Atlantic Council and over here. And he's kind of doing a lot of stuff.
Yeah, yeah, I saw somebody else doing something like that.
You know, the Kurdish leader wants the Turks to be there because
And then Hegel was supposed to do the Atlantic Council.
I noticed that, yeah, but only about
Eye surgery. Apparently had complications because of it.
Oh, I didn't see that.
But it was non-serious complications. So now everybody said maybe I had that would be interesting actually. I would be curious too. There's a paper once I'd be curious to read.
but Baghdad gets
All the airlines.
Yeah, we're supposed to be this week or next week.
Yeah, and it's not going until mid-January. And are the Turks still carrying out airstrikes?
They do from time to time. No, as
I feel like I might say something about being so late.
summer chats, they still
15 minutes.
It's easier because it's fewer sounds.
Then typically about 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And you'll say it's not a little
made
bit.
over like, you know, 2000 years right? The Kurds, well, there's like 20 kids.
And you say, Hitakara, Kadakara, really different.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really the same model.
Yeah.
Apparently she's supposed to be
I learned to consider that. Chinese music. Korean name totally different.
Yeah, Korean sometimes still uses Chinese characters, right?
Oh, yeah.
They're using Hangul, they use
I write my name Chinese. Yep. I think we teach the Chinese
I was back home in
my high school first grade. Then after that,
I'm
changed.
from Lapcha.
But still they use some newspaper, they mix it up.
Yeah, I heard they use it to.
Were you there in
tell the
'88?
difference between
Were
a
you
word,
really?
like if there's two words that sound.
The meaning is the same, but
Wow.
China,
Yes.
so
Did your
complicated.
family, did you have
But
any
they still
family?
mix newspaper.
Like
I understand some
my
changes,
father, my
the
father,
new generation,
members of his family, like cousin, aunts,
they never teaching, you say Hanja, they don't teach
The
anymore.
video was unbelievable. Yeah. Terrible.
We learn Hanja, so we understand. Mix it up.
I know. They're on the restaurant.
And Japanese, very hard pronunciation in computer, Omputa.
But I can.
They're writing more good than
And
all
which
the pronunciation.
Buddha, are you?
Also, Omputa desu ka? Never say computer.
Is that Iraqi?
Sounds
Kurdish.
Yeah, there's four sounds, so they kind of.
Like
But a lot of words in
Turkish.
Japanese are just Western or
Is your
English
family
words.
still in Hawaii?
Yes.
we say water.
For starters.
Keys also using keys and teeth.
There's like it's always interesting because
Abe, he's speaking.
I've got a couple of different words for before.
I know I should make I think better
I'm
sounds
actually
than
pretty
Obama.
good, except with,
President Obama says,
So once they serve so much time, they get to choose one beat to go spend the day, and they all choose him because he's so nice, and because he takes them around and shows them stuff. So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You know, he's so nice. That's why you should be like, you just be mean to everyone, and no one's gonna want to spend time with you. Yeah. Yeah, I think
Afternoon, everybody. Sorry I'm a little late. Good. Pressure's on. Thank you, Bob. Got a couple of announcements and some schedule information off the top before I take your questions. First, I want to address allegations from the Syrian regime that coalition aircraft struck a Syrian army position near the Syrian town of Ayash on December 6th. I want to reiterate once again that these claims are completely false. There were no coalition airstrikes near Ayash on that day, and the closest coalition airstrike on December 6th was approximately 59 kilometers southeast of Ayash against ISIL-controlled oil wellheads. Any suggestion we had something to do with the airstrike in question is completely inaccurate. The coalition maintains exacting procedures and strict protocols to be precise in its airstrikes against ISIL. Bottom line, we know what we hit, and a coalition aircraft did not strike that target. Second, I want to provide you a statement from Secretary Carter on the state of the omnibus spending bill negotiations. That you'll get that statement after this briefing on paper. At a time when our security environment demands a dynamic and agile military, it is vital that negotiations on Capitol Hill arrive at an agreement to fund all of government for the remainder of the fiscal year, consistent with the funding levels set in the budget agreement achieved earlier this year. Further delaying such funding will do real harm. As I have said before, a continuing resolution is a straitjacket for the Department of Defense. It prevents us from fielding a modern, ready force in a balanced way, while embracing reform to ensure that every taxpayer dollar is well spent. It harms our ability to ensure the lasting defeat of ISIL and to confront the many complex national security challenges around the world. Failure to act sends the wrong message to our troops, our allies, and our enemies. There will be ample opportunities for extraneous policy fights in the future, but at this time, Congress must set aside such fights and prioritize our security by funding all of government. Now, turning to the Secretary's schedule, tomorrow Secretary Carter will testify before the Senate Armed Services Committee for the 6th time this year alongside Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs Paul Selva. Chairman Dunford, as you know, is currently overseas visiting our troops, which is why he will not be able to participate in that hearing. The Secretary is looking forward to sharing his views on the counter-ISIL fight and updating the committee on the progress in that fight since his last testimony to the committee 6 weeks ago. He also testified, as you all recall, in front of the House Armed Services Committee just last week. Secretary will also highlight the importance of budget certainty to the Department of Defense in ensuring our national security at this particular moment in time. Also tomorrow, the Secretary will welcome Indian Minister of Defense Manohar Parrikar to the Pentagon for an informal dinner. That will be followed by a bilateral meeting on Thursday in which they will discuss ways to deepen the long-term strategic partnership between our nations. That meeting will be followed by a joint press availability here in the Pentagon briefing room. The Secretary and the Minister are also scheduled to then travel to Norfolk, where they will fly out to the USS Eisenhower and view flight operations on the Eisenhower. And on Friday, Secretary Carter will welcome United Kingdom Secretary of State for Defense Michael Fallon back to the Pentagon for a bilateral meeting, followed by a joint press availability again here in this room. In March, Secretary Fallon was the first foreign defense minister hosted by Secretary Carter after taking office, and Secretary Carter visited Secretary Fallon in London in October. They will discuss new collaboration opportunities following the release of the UK's Strategic Defense and Security Review. They will also discuss the progress of the counter-ISIL fight, especially following the UK vote in Parliament authorizing airstrikes in Syria. As the Secretary has previously stated, the United States is grateful to Secretary Fallon and Prime Minister Cameron for their leadership on this vote and for the UK's expanded role in the campaign to defeat ISIL. And with that, I'm happy to take your questions. Bob?
Peter, there have been reports that the Russians notified the U.S. Through the MOU system of it in advance of some additional round of airstrikes in Syria today. Can you tell us what you know about those strikes and what the targets were?
I can confirm for you that we did get notification of the airstrikes that were conducted by the Russians, but I can't characterize. I'll let the Russians speak for themselves as to what their intended targets were.
Can you say anything about the platforms they used, aircraft, ships, submarines, anything like that? Describe what the operation was.
Yeah. At this point, Bob, I know that we did receive advance notification of, my understanding would be bomber aircraft and cruise missile strikes. And but again, I'll leave it to the Russians to characterize their intended targets. But we did receive notification from the Russians ahead of time.
Did that include a submarine launch cruise missile?
I'm not going to get into the details. My understanding is they did give us the advance notice that there would be strikes, and in terms of the level of detail, I don't have that information directly in front of me.
You don't know that?
I don't know that they provided specific information on the platforms.
So do you know what they used? Did they use a submarine?
Bob, I'm not going to characterize. I don't have that information right now in front of me. Courtney.
How many times have the Russians now notified the U.S. or the coalition in advance of carrying out strikes? Is this the third time now, or have there been more that we
Courtney, I'll double check. I don't have the specific number right here, but it is a handful of times as I understand it. But I don't know if that exact number is right.
And then if I can ask you something else on a different subject. Are you aware whether the U.S. military has any Muslims serving in Iraq or serving in the fight against ISIS?
I can take that question. We certainly have Muslims serving in uniform right now. I can't say with, again, we'll take that question and try and find an answer for you.
I asked the question because there's been a lot, I'm sure you've seen there's been the political discussion about Muslims in the United States, and I'm just wondering if there's been any impact on the U.S. military, given the fact I think there's about 5,900
serving in uniform in the actives and the reserves, has there been any impact? Is the military going to take any steps for new sensitivity training to ensure that there's no issues with the Muslims serving? Has there been any impact on the military based on all of this, new political talk?
There are, as I said before, there are Muslims serving patriotically in the U.S. military today, as there are people of many faiths. I'm not aware of any particular new training as a result of this. We'll check and see if there are Muslims specifically serving in those particular areas that you mentioned. But I would just make the larger point that we don't have, the United States doesn't have any issue, and certainly the Department of Defense, anything that creates tensions and creates the notion that the United States is at odds with the Muslim faith and Islam would be counterproductive to our efforts right now, and totally contrary to our values. And so I'm not aware of any particular effort, given the politics right now, to try and work with Muslims in the U.S. military any differently than we would normally.
Are you at all concerned that this rhetoric will have any impact on Muslims serving in uniform?
I certainly hope it doesn't. And this is certainly something that there are, again, men and women in uniform today of the Muslim faith who are serving this country patriotically, as there are men and women of a whole host of faiths. And anything that tries to challenge American values on this would be certainly something of concern to the Department of Defense, as it would be across the country. We're no different. We represent the country, and the issues that are out there and the tensions that are out there are certainly things that we would be concerned about if they stem from the political world or otherwise.
Peter, can I follow up on that?
Yes.
I just want to make sure I understood what I think you said to Courtney twice now. If you take her question, well-meaning though it was, it's not her question, but you've just said that you will look, unless I misunderstood you, that you will look into whether people in the United States military of the Islamic faith are serving in certain areas of the world. I'm not aware that the Pentagon ever categorizes people or defines people in the military where they serve by what their faith is. It would seem to me that if you're going to answer that question,
Barbara, you're absolutely correct.
You're really breaking significant new ground here today.
There are people serving the U.S. military who have self-identified themselves as members of the Muslim faith.
Of course, and they do that for purposes of if they become wounded, if they are killed in action, so their spiritual needs can be seen to. But you've just said to Courtney, you will take the question where people of the Islamic faith are serving in the U.S. military. Why would you do that?
Her question was specifically, is there some special sensitivity training as well?
She asked if, unless I completely misunderstood Courtney's question, and please tell me if I did. She asked you if there are people of the Islamic faith serving in Iraq or ISIS.
Or in the fight
in the fight against ISIS. You would be breaking significant new ground here today if you were going to answer that question.
You make a good point that there are people of the Muslim faith who are serving right now in uniform. I don't know if they're serving in the Middle East right now, and we don't. Again, the only reason we allow people to self-identify in surveys whether or not they are people of the Muslim faith. So you make a good point, Barbara, and I should be more clear in my answer that whether the question. I'm going to try and answer your question about the sensitivity training, if there's something out there being offered. But I can't necessarily come up with a final answer about numbers of people of certain faiths serving right now. That you make a good point, and I should clarify that's a mistake on my part, that we can't give you that answer because it's not something that we would keep track of or provide that information. But I will try and clarify whether or not there's any effort to proactively reach out to those of a do follow the Muslim faith in terms of whether or not there's some sensitivity training out. I'm not aware of any, and I'm not tracking any, but I will at least ask that question. But you make a good point. Thank you, Barbara.
Let me follow up with the part of, I was really planning to ask about two things. This whole question of banning people of the Islamic faith from coming into this country, what impact, the White House has already come out against it, Secretary Kerry has already come out against it. If there was something like that, what impact does that have on the United States war against ISIS? Does it make it harder for you to prosecute the war, to have coalition partners? Does it make the United States more or less secure? And what does it mean for troops of the Islamic faith who may then not even be allowed to have their own families come into this country to visit them? So there would be quite a significant potential impact.
Barbara, as you said, we are partnering right now with Muslim nations. We have troops serving that follow the Muslim faith. And again, without wading into politics, anything that tries to bolster, if you will, the ISIL narrative that the United States is somehow at war with Islam is contrary to our values and contrary to our national security. We are, as I mentioned, working with Muslim nations right now. We want to, in essence, take the fight to ISIL with the help of Muslims and others around the world. And anything that somehow challenges that, we think would be counterproductive to our national security.
So you would be, this department and the Secretary of Defense and the chairman are opposed to a ban?
Again, Barbara, I'm not going to get into domestic politics. I can just tell you.
Well, the White House said it was and the State Department said it was.
Well, we think, again, I'll just reiterate what I said. Anything that bolsters ISIL's narrative and pits the United States against the Muslim faith is certainly not only contrary to our values, but contrary to our national security. Yes, Jennifer.
Peter, on November 21st, Iran carried out a medium-range ballistic missile test in Chabahar in southeast Iran. This is in breach of 2 UN Security Council resolutions. First of all, can you provide us with any details about that missile launch? What did you see? Was it a success? And is the Defense Department concerned about this second Iranian ballistic missile test in 2 months?
Jennifer, I can tell you we're aware of the reports that Iran did conduct a medium-range ballistic missile test in recent weeks. We're conducting a serious review of the reported incident, but we don't have more details specifically to share at this time on that. I'm not going to get into intelligence. We will continue to work closely with our allies and partners to address Iran's missile development activities, including by promoting implementation of the requirements of relevant Security Council resolutions.
Do you consider this a breach of UN Security Council resolutions?
I'm not going to characterize it further. We're conducting a serious review of this incident as it's been reported, and we'll provide the details on that when it's complete. Yes.
I have a couple of questions. First, the Kurdish officials and fighters in Syria claim that the U.S. military engineers are on
in
the
where,
ground.
I'm sorry?
In Syria. The U.S. military engineers are working with the Kurds in Syria, renovate an airfield so that this will be used for the U.S. Special Forces to help the Kurds there. You know, either
take steps and to help Congress change the law so that women and men at age 18 will have to apply for or register for selective service?
Jennifer, I think, as you know, that we did provide a legal analysis to the Congress, but this is an issue that's a legal issue. It's a matter of litigation, as the Secretary pointed out, and geography, things like that. But I think it's pretty clear that the Russian efforts, that the Assad regime has certainly its military has been bolstered by the Russian efforts, and again, it's anything that
counterproductive to the
helps the Assad regime and its efforts to stay in power, we think, is counterproductive to the end result of trying to end the Syrian civil war. And so that's been our position from the start. They clearly have benefited from having the support of Russian air power,
but they clearly have been bolstered by it.
But I can't characterize specifically how much ground they've taken as a result. But they clearly have been bolstered by it.
On Secretary Carter's Goldwater and Austin and I with Politico. Can you give us just some more information on Secretary Carter's Goldwater and Nichols review? What's the scope of it? Who specifically, both here in the Pentagon and outside people, is he meeting with on this? What's the timeline and what's the final product going to look like?
Feels is important. The review has just begun, but this is something that the Secretary feels is important to make sure that we're doing things take a look at the department, the structure right now within the DoD, and to make sure that we're doing things as efficiently as possible. There are a host of things on the table for review. He's getting input from the services, from the service secretaries, from outside the building as well, people who have experience in these matters. And he wants recommendations. I don't have the exact timeline for you, but I know he's looking early into next year to have some recommendations to move forward. I know Congress is looking at some of these issues as well. And the Secretary welcomes the interest of Congress, but this is something that he's initiated here within the department itself to take a hard look at how things are structured right now, whether or not things could be done differently in the spirit of Goldwater Nichols and the changes that resulted from that many years ago.
I imagine at this point, and again, we're waiting for the recommendations to come back,
that he thinks he can do under his own authority or something else?
I imagine at this point, and again, we're waiting for the recommendations to come back, but the Secretary thinks that there are things he can do on his own, again, if these are changes that make sense and, again, withstand his own review of whatever recommendations come forward. But obviously, this is something that, if they're substantial, would require potentially action from Congress. And Congress is also looking at these issues, both the House and Senate Armed Services Committee. And so I think you can expect it probably, at the end of the day, probably a mix of both. Initiatives that he can carry out here on his own, and things that might require some congressional action.
Sinjar City in Iraq.
Yes.
Sinjar.
I don't have the
Sinjar City in
operational
Iraq.
details right here, right now. I understand.
Obviously,
we've I don't have the
spoken from here about
operational details right here, right now. I understand. Obviously, we've spoken from here about cutting off Highway 47 and the actions of the opposition forces there.
ISIL and the effort to
the forces that took that area from ISIL and the effort to try and cut off connection between Mosul and Raqqa that's been effective. It's made a difference in the campaign right now. But there's still areas of fighting happening in that immediate area. But my understanding is that the forces that took Sinjar still have significant control over the area, but I don't have all the operational details at this particular moment as to what's changed in the past few days.
There are reports that some PKK elements have taken over some government buildings in Sinjar city. Could you?
I don't have information on that to confirm that for you.
Has the U.S. used the MOU to raise any more concerns of any close calls? Have there been any instances from Russia? Like, has the U.S. used the MOU to raise any more concerns of any close calls? Have there been any instances like that? I'm asking because within the past couple days, Russia released a video that purports to show a Reaper drone in the skies of Syria. Has that been a concern? Are you aware of that?
Specifically in recent days, I'm not aware of any particular issues that have come up specifically in recent days regarding close calls at this point. As I said, in large measure, the MOU has achieved its stated purpose, which is to keep our crews at a safe distance and without any risk of miscalculation or an accident in the skies. And so I'm not aware of the specific video they posted, but by and large, the MOU has served its purpose, and we're pleased with that, and we expect that going forward it will continue to keep our air crews safe and keep them at a safe distance from Russian aircraft.
Has that all been worked out with the Iraqis? There seems to be some indication. Peter, the Expeditionary Targeting Force, has that all been worked out with the Iraqis? There seems to be some indications that potentially there still needs work to be done legally, I guess, about getting this force inside Iraq from the government of Iraq side. Is that the case?
Louis, I know that the Expeditionary Targeting Force was something that we've been in consultation with the Iraqis for some time now about exactly their deployment. We're coordinating closely with the Iraqis. I'm sure that there are some issues that will be ongoing in terms of our discussions with them about their use and implementation, but nothing that we feel stands in the way of them getting down to business, and their business will be to go after ISIL, in coordination and in consultation with the Iraqi government. But I'm not aware of anything at this point that's going to stand in the way of their moving forward with operations.
Yes, but just as there's discussions underway with the Iraqis about this force.
Yes, but just as there's discussions with Iraqis right now about U.S. forces in Iraq in a range of areas. So this will be an ongoing discussion. We're trying to find out the best way to partner with Iraqi forces as well. And so this is part of the coordination and communication that we always anticipated would be part of the ETF going forward. I'm not going to provide those details, Bob. These forces in a position to carry out their work. Soon. We hope to have these forces in a position to carry out their work as quickly as possible. And again, their job, their mission will be to put even more pressure on ISIL, and particularly ISIL leadership, and to wonder on a daily basis exactly what to be doing immediately. So, yes.
Any update on Ramadi? There are reports that the Iraqi security forces were able to finally move into the city.
I do have some information on Ramadi. I know that the Iraqi security forces have reported to us that they have cleared the Tamim neighborhood in Ramadi. This is a neighborhood that overlooks downtown and provides an important tactical advantage. This is still a highly contested area, and there have been some advances by the Iraqi security forces in Ramadi, but this is an ongoing fight, and we're obviously watching very, very closely to see the progress that they make.
Do you think Ramadi is on the verge of falling
Or would you say that, yeah?
I'm not going to make predictions. This has been a long, hard fight. At this point, we're encouraged by what we're seeing from the Iraqi security forces. This development regarding Tamim is helpful, but this was the ISIL forces there were able to entrench themselves. There's a lot of IEDs. There are a lot of threats for the Iraqi security forces moving in there. And this has taken some time. We expect it's going to take some additional time, but we're encouraged by what we're seeing on the ground. Yes?
The Iraqi forces in the lead there, are they the forces that were trained by the U.S. or are they other Iraqi security forces? Do you know?
My understanding is it's a mix, but there certainly are some forces that were trained by the U.S., but I can't say that it's the entire contingent. So I got time for like one more. So, yes, Christina.
Thanks, Peter. Through which channel did Russia give the U.S. a heads up about the cruise missiles? If it's not through the, designated channel for airspace deconfliction.
It was through one of the communication line, as I understand it, that we do have. That's the backup communication line. So they did it through the MOU channel, even though, again, this kind of notification is not specifically part of the memorandum of understanding. So it's our direct line. It's their best way to reach us with something like this.
And then also, two former top defense officials testified today to Michelle Flournoy and Michael Vickers. They said the U.S. is not where it needs to be in the fight against ISIS. Vickers said he doesn't believe that the U.S. is winning. Do you agree with those remarks? What's your response to those remarks?
Well, the Secretary will be up there testifying tomorrow. You can hear what he has to say about where the fight against ISIL stands, and I think you'll hear from the Secretary at that point, as you have in recent days, that there is more to be done. But we are intensifying and accelerating our campaign. He's going to detail exactly some of those steps we're doing, steps that have been in play since before the attacks in Paris. And I think the Secretary will be able to characterize well for members of the committee exactly where we stand, what we're doing, and where progress still needs to be made as well.
So he may announce new steps tomorrow.
I think stay tuned. You'll hear what the Secretary has to say. But I think, as you heard in the House testimony, we are moving on multiple fronts to apply pressure to ISIL, and that effort's going to continue, and that